Hello everyone. So let's discuss some different types of waste. So industrial solid waste. So most methods and strategies of waste disposal, reduction, and recycling by industry are similar to the municipal solid waste. Industrial solid waste includes waste from factories, mining activities, agriculture, petroleum extraction, and more. Some businesses they can do their own disposal and they can maintain their own waste site, but they need to follow the standards with the EPA. Industrial ecology seeks to redesign industrial systems to reduce resource inputs and maximize both physical and economic efficiency. So they're trying to come up with ways that would be more efficient. So they're doing a lot of experimentation to see how can they do that, how can they make it more efficient. The goal is to function more like ecological system, which organisms use almost everything that is produced and there's less waste. So a life cycle analysis is something that finds ways to any part of generating process to make it more efficient. That includes obtaining raw materials, manufacturing its use and disposal. And then maybe you can use waste products from one to for other processes. And environmentally harmful products are eliminated, and any design changes are made that can increase durability, recyclability, and reusability. So one example of that is of industrial ecology is found in breweries and that take waste from the beer brewing process and they use it to produce mushrooms. So they can use their waste grain to make the bread and to farm mushrooms. And waste from the mushroom farming, along with the brewery, wastewater goes to feed the pigs. And the pigs' waste is digested in a container that capture natural gas and collect the nutrients used to nourish algae for growing fish in fish farms. So, it's like going from one process, you'd have grain and water making beer, and wastewater is going to the pigs. Pigs' waste is going to make the gas and feed the fish. So you're taking waste of one product and using it to make another product, which is very, very useful. And then we have another type of waste, which is hazardous waste. It has these characteristics: ignitable. That means it's likely to catch fire, for example, gasoline or alcohol. Corrosive. It can corrode metals in storage tanks or equipment. So strong acid or bases can do that. It's reactive, chemically unstable, and readily able to react with other substances. So like ammonia, chlorine bleach that you use for, laundry or cleaning. It's toxic, means it's harmful to our health when inhaled, ingested, or touched. So pesticides or heavy metals would be an example of that. So industry produces most of the hazardous waste. Uh, but there are many forms of household hazardous waste as well. So paints, batteries, oils, solvents, cleaning agents, lubricants, and pesticides are an example of that. And industry, mining, households, and small businesses, they can create all the hazardous waste. And in developed countries, nations, industrial waste is disposed, um, and it's very highly regulated. There are lots of rules and regulations for it. Organic compounds are heavy metal, and heavy metal they pose a lot of hazards. So in our daily lives, we rely on synthetic organic compounds, which are human-made carbon-based chemicals. So those might be derived from those might be we might be using it to resist bacteria, fungal, insect activity. This includes plastic containers, rubber tires, pesticides, solvents, wood preservatives. So they're useful because they resist decomposition. But we use these products to protect buildings from decay, kill pests that attack the crops so we can have more yield and feed the population. so we can keep goods stored in plastic containers. So it's like a double-edged sword because these are also making pollutants and it's also creating waste. So many synthetic organic compounds are toxic because they're really absorbed through our skin and mutagens, and they can act as mutagen carcinogens, tetragens, and then endocrine disruptors. And they're also persistent, meaning they do not break down easily. And heavy metals like lead and mercury are fat soluble, so they can go in your body and they can be stored in the fat cells. And they can also, they're also prone to bioaccumulate and biomagnification, which we talked about before. And there's electronic waste. So we use a lot of computers now, printers, smartphones, tablets, TVs, and other electronic technology has gone up recently, the use of it. So the products have short lifespans before people, you know, judge them and they discard them. Like, think about iPhones. They're releasing a new iPhone every year. So uh, people are buying them every year. So it's a short lifespan. So the amount of electronic waste is called e-waste, and these end up in the landfills. Once you're done with them, they just end up in the landfills. And because these contain heavy metals and toxic substances, there are steps that the EPA has to take to kind of redirect it to the hazardous waste sites. So if we can downsize of electronic items, we can shift towards mobile. Uh, we can shift towards something that we will use longer. That would be helpful for the e-waste. And combination of devices becoming smaller, increase in recycling rates has decreased the amount of e-waste, but it's still pretty high. So this is in 2000s and this is 2015, and this is the amount of e-waste. This is recycled and this is how much is generated. So besides keeping the toxic substances out of our waste system, e-waste recycling can help us recover rare trace metals that we use in electronics. I don't know if you guys know this, but computer scrap contains more gold than, so 1 ton of computer scrap contains more gold than 16 tons of mine or from gold mine. So same with iPhones, 1 ton of iPhones contains more than 300 times gold than the gold mine. They also made in Olympics, they made these medals or from the recycled electronics waste. So gold, bronze, and um, silver medals, they made it from the e-waste, recycled. So for many years, we discarded hazardous waste without special treatment. And in some cases, people didn't even know that it's harmful to human health. So they thought that, they would disappear if they are just sufficiently diluted in the environment. And then in 1970s, um, that's when that happened. And Love Canal is an area in New York. So years after that happening there, um, it it the toxic material started to resurface, and the chemicals started to resurface in a residential area, which made them consider that the hazardous waste needs special treatment and attention. So the EPA, they set standards for hazardous waste to manage, and there are special ways that you have to manage this waste, and it's costly. And because it's costly, some companies they illegally dump their waste, creating a health risk for residents and people. So facilities they can generate, transport, or dispose hazardous waste. Um, but they need to report to the EPA the amount of the material generated, the location of the origin, and how they're handling it. So that creates high um, waste, sorry, high cost for it, and that's the reason companies are dumping it. And they need special facilities to collect it as well. So we use three disposal methods for it. So one we talked about already, which was the landfills. The other one is surface impoundments. These are shallow depression lines with plastic and impervious material that are used to store liquid hazardous waste. The water evaporates from it and it leaves the solid behind, and you take the solid and you transport to the permanent disposal facility. The second one is deep well injection. So you drill deep into the soil, and once you pass the groundwater, then you can inject the waste there. So here's an example of that. So injection well, they just drill down, they pass the aquifers, and then they're in the porous rock, and they inject the waste there. So this poses risks because you're kind of going down in the crust of the earth, and that means that can induce earthquakes. And it can also corrode and leak into the soil, and it can contaminate the aquifer. Right now, 34 billion liters of the hazardous waste is placed in the US injection well. And then there's radioactive waste, which is also hazardous. And this is, produced from the nuclear facilities. So the radioactive waste is dangerous to our health and is persistent in the environment. So US has no area to dispose it, and if we take Yucca Mountain in the Nevada out. So waste is currently held in a temporary storage in the nuclear power plant across the country. And there's a site in Chuan Desert in New Mexico that serves as a permanent disposal location of this waste. So it's below ground, a huge salt formation that they think is geologically stable, and that's being used uh, as a facility that holds this waste, and it receives waste from a couple other locations.